يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له إن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وأحسن الهدي محمد وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So today, my brothers and sisters, I want to talk about a very important topic that I feel the need that needs to be addressed, inshallah. And what I'm going to be talking about is the rights of the father in Islam and how we should be towards our father and how we should behave with our father, and specifically the father. And the reason is because we already know to a certain degree as how we should be with our mothers. And there's a beautiful hadith, a famous hadith that we've all heard of, that when the man approached Rasulullah ﷺ and he asked him, who is most deserving of my kind treatment? And Rasulullah ﷺ said, your mother. And he asked again, who is most deserving of my kind treatment? And Rasulullah ﷺ said, my mother, your mother. And he asked again a third time, and Rasulullah ﷺ said, repeated himself a third time and said, your mother. And he asked a fourth time, and finally Rasulullah ﷺ said, your father. So the mother, and then the father. And we all know that Jannah lies beneath the feet of the mother. So we already have a good understanding of how we should be towards our mothers, that we should be kind to her, and we should strive to be the best towards her. But unfortunately, in my opinion, I feel as if the side of the father is not addressed too much in our society. And that needs to be heavily addressed. And the first thing I want to start off with, brothers, is a hadith, and I'm going to paraphrase it, where a man approached Rasulullah ﷺ and he complained to him. And he said that, you know what, my father, he takes my money from me. And Rasulullah ﷺ said to the man that, okay, call your father. And as the father was coming to Rasulullah ﷺ, Angel Jibreel at that moment came down and he said to Rasulullah ﷺ that when the man approaches you, when the father approaches you, ask him what he was saying along the way when he was approaching you. So the father, as he was approaching Rasulullah ﷺ, was whispering something to himself. And the angel told Rasulullah ﷺ, ask him what he's whispering. And so when the father approached, Rasulullah ﷺ asked him, why do you take your son's money? And the father said, Ya Rasulullah, if you only knew why I take it. I only take it because there's an old auntie that I have to help out with the money, that's all. And then Rasulullah ﷺ said, okay fine, tell me one thing, what were you whispering along the way when you were coming? And basically the father, he paraphrased in such a beautiful manner, which I'm going to paraphrase, in which he told Rasulullah ﷺ that I wrote a poem. I wrote like something to look at, a reflection that I can look back at. And it was about his son. And he tells Rasulullah ﷺ that when my son was a little child, I used to take care of him. I fed him. I clothed him. I gave him everything that I could possibly give him, for him to stand up one day and to be a man and to stand on his own 2 feet, so that perhaps, maybe, he could give back, and so that perhaps I could see the fruit of my labor. But instead, my son, the moment he became a man, and he became independent, he thought that he knows better. He thought that he can now have an attitude against me. And he thought that I'm nothing now. And he repaid my kindness with harsh treatment and bad manners and bad attitude. And Rasulullah ﷺ at that moment, he was soaked with tears, so much to the point that his beard was soaking with tears, dripping from his beard. And out of fierce emotion, he grabbed the son by the chest and he pulled him close. And he said to him, everything you own and everything you have belongs to the father. My brothers and sisters, unfortunately living here in a Western majority society, unfortunately a lot of us are living in a fool's paradise. We assume as if the culture we live in and the things that we're being taught and the things we're being told through the media, through the movies we watch, through the articles we read, through the books we read, looking at other people's stories and seeing how they are with their parents, we assume that, you know what, as soon as I'm 18, I'm an adult now, mashallah, and I'm independent. Well, let me tell you one thing. I've got news for you, my brothers and sisters, and I'm going to tell you very directly. None of you and none of us, including me, are ever going to be independent in front of our parents, ever. This concept of 18 and that I'm an adult, this is what the Western laws are teaching us. If you think for a second that now that you're 18 and you've got some rights and that you have now the right to speak up and say something against your father, you're living in a fool's paradise, my brothers and sisters. Because in Islam, regardless of what age you are, my brothers and sisters, whether you are 18 or whether you are 30 or whether you are 60, your parents are still your parents at the end of the day. Whether you are the one now that's looking after the house and paying the bills, and you now are wearing the suit that you bought by yourself in your own hard work, Wallahi al-Azim, if your father decided the next day to take every single cent out of your bank account, you have nothing in the Islamic courtroom, nothing at all. Because everything you own belongs to your father. And what I'm about to say, don't take it literally, you have to understand it metaphorically. Your father, he owns you. He owns you. Why? Because he owns your clothes, he owns your shoes, he owns everything about you. So it is as if he literally owns you. And we think now we have something against our fathers and we have a right to speak up and say something. I'm not talking about exceptional circumstances, my brothers and sisters. Nobody here can deny that parents do bad. And yes, it is true that the sons and daughters also have their rights. And parents can be abusive. And parents can be bad. But what the point I'm trying to get at, my brothers and sisters, it is nothing to be proud about when you are good to your parents, only when they are good to you. And as soon as they are bad to you, as soon as they do something you don't like, you immediately become bad towards them. Why? Because my father said no. Every time I wanted to go out with the boys, he said yes. Why all of a sudden he's not letting me go out when I want to go out with my friends? Why all of a sudden he's not allowing me to buy that clothing that I want? Why all of a sudden it's my money, I earn it? Why does he have a right? He's your father. He has every right. And wallahi, you should feel some humility and some shame when you stand in front of your father. The fact that he even allows you to go and do what you want is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you should be grateful to your father instead of thinking that you've got some talking points against him. If the parents are bad and if the parents do wrong to the children, that is between Allah and your dad and your parents in general. You don't have the right to say, how come my father is like this and how he is like that? The only thing you and I have to take into account and to remember is that I have to do ihsan towards my parents. That regardless of how my parents are towards me, makes no difference to me. I will continue to be the best towards them. In fact, I'm going to be the best towards them, and if they do wrong to me, I will be even better than, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let me talk about the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, my brothers and sisters, where Allah mentioned literally in the Quran itself. The father of Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was the most corrupt person and the biggest disbeliever at the time. In fact, some scholars even say that Ibrahim alayhi salam was the only Muslim on planet Earth at that time. The only Muslim. Think about yourself. If you walked out today knowing that you are the only Muslim and your friends are against your deen and your mother is against your deen and your father is against your deen and they are threatening to kick you out the house, how will you then behave with your parents? Or will you wage war against them? Most of us would, even though we think not to, or whether we think we wouldn't. But the truth is we would. Because we don't have the patience like Ibrahim alayhi salam, unfortunately. But when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he tried to preach to his father, he was a disbeliever, he was not even a Muslim. How did he address his father? His father was cursing him, abusing him, traumatizing him, torturing him, threatening him to kick him out the house, which he eventually does. How does Ibrahim alayhi salam behave? Does he run around telling people, my father did this and he did that and he was abusive and this is wrong and he kicked me out of the house and I'm not going to love him and respect him anymore? Rubbish! It's all rubbish. I'm sorry, but this you have to understand. Your patience, Allah will reward. You don't need to worry. But you and I don't have any say against our parents. If they are wrong, Allah will deal with them. You and I only have to focus on how am I going to be with them. And how does Ibrahim alayhi salam address his father? He says what? He says, Ya abati, oh my beloved father. Allahu Akbar. This is Ibrahim alayhi salam. This is who we should strive to be. Your father, he deserves the best from you. He deserves the best character from you. He deserves all the best smiles from you. He deserves all the best assalamu alaikums from you. He deserves the absolute best from you and out of you. When your father comes downstairs and you are sitting in the living room on your sofa and he's walking towards you, you get up and you take his hand and you kiss it and you put it on the forehead and you say assalamu alaikum, oh my beloved father. When your father is standing, you should also be standing when you speak to him. How dare we think that we have the right to be sitting when our fathers are standing? How do we think we have the right to be standing when our fathers are sitting? How do we think we have this right? Where did we learn this ethics from? Where did we get this mentality from? You know, this is basic business ethics too. Let me tell you one psychological thing, my brothers and sisters. When you're in a business meeting and you put your phone on the table, subconsciously everybody around you think that you don't care about the meeting at all. Why? Because you put it on the table without you even realizing that perhaps if a text message comes or if the phone vibrates, you can check quickly and put it back. And a lot of us like to think that if I do this quickly, it won't make a big deal. But wallahi, it's noticeable and everybody notices it in their subconscious mind. When we are with our fathers and when we're speaking to our parents in general, are we giving them our undivided attention? Or do we have our phones in our laps and looking at our phones as our fathers are speaking to us? Do we ask them constantly why? This question, why, has been running around too much lately these days. Because when our fathers tell us something, we feel the right to ask why though. You and I don't have any right to ask why, my brothers and sisters. And let me say one thing. It is far better to be oppressed than to be the oppressor. It is far better than to live in the oppression of your parents than to live as you being the one oppressing your parents. Because if your parents are oppressing you, I got good news for you, my brothers and sisters. Good news provided that you continue to be the best towards them despite how they are towards you. Most of us have messed up lives. I've heard stories of brothers being kicked out of their houses. I understand. But my brother and my sister, you have to understand, this is a crown. This is a crown Allah is putting on your head. Because Allah only tests those who He loves. So you should be thankful to Allah. And I'll say another thing. If you think you're being mistreated, what, do you think you're the only one that's unhappy? You think you're the only one being treated badly by your parents? Go look up stories online, man, and what parents are doing to their children. You and I don't go through that. We should be thankful to Allah. With all the flaws that our parents have, with all the flaws that our fathers have, He only screams at you and shouts at you and disciplines you out of the love He has for you. And wallahi, the only man on planet Earth that wants you to be respected just like how the prime ministers are respected, just like how the presidents are respected, is your father. Your father is the only man that wants you to be the most respected wherever you go. Your father is the only man who wants the absolute best for you and nothing else. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. I want to mention something specific, and this is tied into the topic about behaving with our fathers, and it's about marriage. And I'm speaking generally. Don't, think about your exceptions. I'm speaking generally. Most of us, without letting our parents know, we form a connection with the opposite gender. And now, you know what? I'll let you go with it. Perhaps you are doing it with a halal intention of you wanting to get married. Fine. Most of us, it's not that case. But you know what? I'll let you go with it. Let's just say, for the sake of the argument, you're doing it for a halal reason. You have only pure intentions. You're trying to get to know this girl because sooner or later you want to tell your father, okay. Don't be the guy that forms a connection with this girl and you are 6 months in talking and texting this girl. And you've decided at the back of your mind, and both of you have decided together that now we're going to go to our parents and tell them that, you know what, this guy, he's the one, I'm going to marry him. Because wallahi, if you think for a second that if you go to your parents after 6 months or a year, by forming this connection that you have with this girl or boy that you formed, you're not really taking permission from your parents. You're not really saying to your dad, can I marry him? What you're really saying is, he's the one, so let it go, let it happen. Wallahi, you're putting a dagger to your father's heart. It's a dagger. Let me give you an analogy, perhaps you can understand. Imagine if you plant a seed and you water it and you nourish it for 17 years, looking after it and taking care of it, only to see this tree grow. So perhaps once it produces fruit, you can eat from it. And now that it reaches its point where it's about to blossom and give fruits, a stranger completely out from the street who doesn't even know the man, the father doesn't even know who the guy is, he hasn't even seen him, hasn't heard him, nothing, a complete stranger comes and takes the fruits away from him. That is exactly what happens to your father when you come to your father after a year without him even knowing about anything and telling him, this guy, I've been talking for a year now or 6 months, he's the one, so let it happen. And then the sister wants to say, I took permission. This is not permission. You're telling him I'm going to marry him. You're telling him. Same thing with the brothers. You're telling him. You're not taking permission. And wallahi, speaking generally, you should only marry the person that your father chooses for you. Because he knows what's better for you than you do. Controversial opinion, that's fine. But you should only marry the person your father chooses. Because you might think that my father doesn't know what I want. Wallahi, he knows exactly what you want, and he knows exactly what you're thinking. And he is thinking about things that you are not thinking. When he looks at the girl and he says, son, you're making a mistake. She ain't good for you. Your father, who is 50 years, 40 years, he's been on planet Earth 40, 50 years longer than you. He has more experience than you. He has seen things more than you. And you think you know something that the father doesn't? Your father knows exactly why she's not good for you. He knows exactly why. He knows exactly why that guy is not good for you. And I'll say one thing to the brothers specifically. If you're talking to a girl and her father doesn't like you, and he's made it clear that he doesn't want you to be the one that marries his daughter, and you continue speaking to her, then have some shame, have some shut-off, have some humility, and leave that girl and walk away like a real man. Don't try to be the one that runs away with the girl. This is not a Bollywood movie, my brothers and sisters. This concept that we are being told in the movies, that it's all love, and we should just stand up for ourselves, it's all garbage. Realistically, nothing works that way. In real life, I'm telling you one thing, if you are willing to make your parents unhappy just so that you can be happy with the one you want to marry, Allah will be displeased with you for the rest of your life. Because you let your parents go just for a girl or just for a guy. And no parent has the right to force you to do anything. You have every right to choose who you want to marry. But I'm just saying, are you really willing to make your parents unhappy and not talk to your parents 10 years, 20 years just because you wanted to marry that girl? It is far better to make your parents happy and become unhappy for the sake of Allah. Because I'll tell you one thing, The girl you leave or the guy you leave for your parents, Allah will give you 10 times better. And if you think that that's not possible because I'm in love, this is a movie concept. Love is a choice, my brothers and sisters. Be a man. Don't be weak, be a man. If you want to leave that girl, you can easily leave her if you decide to. So don't ruin your parents' life by living for 18 years, 19 years, and you come into college and your father's developing you, trying to do the best for you, and all of a sudden you come with nobody in front of him and telling him he is the one. If you are genuinely sincere and you genuinely want to do something in a halal way, starting day one, let your parents know. Starting day one. And I'll end off with a quote, inshallah. And this is something my father told me himself. I've never heard any sheikh or any scholar or any mufti say this. And this is why it's very dear to me. So please try to understand it. And this is very important. If your parents are happy with you, you might get Jannah. You might. Maybe, maybe not. If your parents love you, you might get Jannah. But if you love your parents, then you will definitely get Jannah. Impossible if you don't get it. Impossible. Why? Because a lot of times we hurt our parents so much to the point that no matter what we do, they continually forgive us. That's how parents are. That's the raham Allah has put into the hearts of the parents. But who said anything about Allah forgiving me? Oh brother, how can you say that Allah is the most forgiving? He's going to forgive me. Oh really? You think Allah is going to neglect the pain that you threw upon your mother and father? And just because they forgive you, and let's be honest, they're not really forgiving you. They just love you a lot, and you're their son and you're their daughter, and they're just saying, fine, you know what, even though my son hurt me, I forgive him. Ya Allah, forgive him. But deep down, your mother and father are still in pain. Still in pain, and Allah will not ignore that pain. And perhaps karma will hit you, my brothers and sisters. So be very careful with how you and I are towards our parents. Because perhaps the way we are towards our parents is going to be reflected with how our children are towards us. So if your parents love you, you might get Jannah, because you might not love them. You might be the worst towards them, but they still might love you. So you might get Jannah. But if you love your parents, despite how they are towards you, then you will definitely get Jannah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us the best towards our parents. We ask Allah to honor the rights of the mother and the father in Islam, and especially when it comes to the father, may Allah allow us to understand that for the rest of our lives, we will have to be dedicated to our father and to be the best towards our fathers. Even though we might have ego issues, even though we might have attitude issues, we ask Allah to cure us from this illness and to make us truly amongst those that do ihsan towards our parents, and to be just like how Ibrahim alayhi salam was with his father. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. قولوا قولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم. أقيموا الصلاة.